Hello, and welcome to the HAFN10 webinar titled Harnessing the Power of Social Media, Training for Anti-Poverty Advocates. At this point, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, Melissa Boytek.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Boytek, and I'm the manager of the HAFN10 campaign. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. By way of background, HAFN10 is a partnership between the Center for American Progress Action Fund, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and the Coalition on Human Needs, dedicated to building the political and public will to cut poverty in half in 10 years. I don't need to tell you that this goal has never been more urgent. Last year, 1 in 7 Americans and 1 in 5 children lived in poverty, with widening racial and ethnic disparities. It is in this environment that we're having a conversation on reducing the deficit, with conservatives intent on slashing the programs helping the most vulnerable weather the recession, while preserving and expanding tax breaks for the wealthy. It is in this environment that we need to bring the voices of those most impacted by this recession to the forefront and build the political and public will for balanced and fair deficit reduction that does not exacerbate poverty and inequality, and also present an alternative vision of shared prosperity and opportunity for all. This training is designed to give us another tool in the toolbox to do this work. Social media has emerged as a new and effective tool for advocacy and organizing. While various organizations have begun to understand and to utilize the potential that Facebook, Twitter, and other areas of new media offer, this briefing will highlight new and innovative opportunities for the poverty and economic opportunity community to gain traction and a presence online. Moreover, this training will talk about how we take social media from being just a communications tool to leveraging it for grassroots activism, and then describe specific opportunities for you to get involved and apply these new skills to the budget debate. Before we get started, we have 2 questions for the audience to help us inform our presentations. The first one is, please tell us a little bit more about your social media usage. Do you have an active Facebook account, a Twitter account, a blog, a YouTube channel, or some combination of the above? If you do, let us know, and as we're going through the presentation, we can make sure to take into account your answers. All right. Looks like we have a lot of people who have a combination of the above and are using Facebook. For the next question, tell us a little bit about the main way that you use your social media accounts if you have them. Do you use them to share relevant news with your networks, to share papers and products that your organization creates, to interact with like-minded organizations and advocates, or as a tool to take action and connect with members of Congress and the media? This briefing will touch on all these things. We want to get a sense of how people are currently using social media. Great. Okay, so I'm going to now turn it over to my colleague, Alan Rosenblatt, who's the Associate Director for Online Advocacy at the Center for American Progress and the Center for American Progress Action Fund. I've had the pleasure of working with Alan over the past few years to grow HAFN10's social media presence, and under his leadership, CAP has won a new media presence award that's called the 2010 Marquee. So I'm pleased to turn it over to Alan to begin his presentation.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Melissa. It's been great working with HAFN10. They've done some amazing work to help the whole coalition and the anti-poverty movement become more effective on social media, and I really get very excited about that. So let's move into the presentation itself. Call it Here Comes Social Advocacy. There's a great book out there called Here Comes Everybody, Organizing Without Organization by Clay Shirky, and this title is an homage to him. It's a great book to read. I recommend it highly, and it really talks about how social media has provided opportunities for advocacy organizations, or rather advocacy causes, to rise up without necessarily having an organization behind them, and then organization sort of emerges from that. And that's a really great opportunity, and one that we can really leverage as we move forward in the campaign to end poverty. So let's start with talking about how online advocacy used to work, and it's kind of funny to say that, given that online advocacy tends to be fairly new, but the truth is it's a good 15, 16 years old since the original CapWiz tool came on the market around 1996, 97. But within this context, the way the model worked initially was we would send emails out to our email list with a call to action on it. It would take them to an action page where they could sign a petition or send a message via email to Congress. That message would arrive in Congress, and Congress would process it. The problems with this, while very successful and very valuable and something we still do and should continue to do, is that email is essentially a closed loop. You can only send emails to people you already have on your list and not to new people. And the messages that go into Congress, we really have no control over whether or not they process that information at all or in a timely fashion. Yes, the First Amendment says that we have the right to petition our government with grievances, but it doesn't require that Congress actually takes it seriously. This is a sad truth in some offices, but not always, but it's really an important thing. The closed-loop nature of this means that you have to take the congressional offices at their word that they received, that they're actually processing that information, and they may actually take that information, the messages from constituents, and not bother with it until the day after the vote if they really don't want to be held accountable for it. So in that context, the rise of social media has now created a new set of channels which we can use to complement what we do with email, where we're using Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and other social media to create a more public-facing strategy to complement the email or closed-loop strategy that we've been using for so many years. In this way, we use Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and other social media to put our message out there, our call to action out there, in such a way that not only do people who follow us and are fans of us or are on our email list get to see it, but other people get to see it as well, especially as is the nature with social media. People share it. They get to spread it to their friends and family and take that kind of credibility and persuasion that they have over their networks to get more people to participate. That's a really, really important element to this. Then we can drive them not just to a traditional landing page which has an email, send an email or sign a petition, but we could also send them to a Twitter petition page. There's a great website called Actly, ACT.ly is the URL, where you can set up a Twitter petition that targets any target person, a member of Congress, and at this point at least 3/4 of the members of Congress have Twitter addresses. You simply put their Twitter name into the petition form, and you can create a petition that every time somebody retweets the petition, they're essentially delivering that message over and over again into the public inbox or the mentions box on that member of Congress's Twitter account. Likewise, most members of Congress have a Facebook page, and now while systematically they're starting to turn off the ability for constituents to post on comments on their wall or to post on their wall, they can't turn off the ability for us to post comments in reply to the things that they post on their wall. And so you can drive activists to those pages and say, you know, go to the most recent thing that that member of Congress has posted on their wall, and in the comments section start posting our message on this campaign, and make sure that that's always there so that no matter who comes to that website for how many days we want to do it, there's always going to be messages from constituents saying, calling for action on the particular piece of legislation that we're pushing. This complements with members of the email coming into the office, but it does so in a very, very public, accountable way. Think of this as a virtual sit-in, where you might have a sit-in outside a member's office in the real world, out in the offline world. The only people who ever see that kind of sit-in, aside from the people who work in the office, are anybody who happens to walk by the sit-in as it's happening, or if the press covers it, anybody who happens to catch the story on the news when it runs. But if you're doing it virtually, you can ensure that your activists are pushing and posting stuff on the Facebook wall or the Twitter page, Twitter account for the member of Congress constantly, and anybody who goes to those pages will see it. But then you can tell the press, and you can tell your email list, and you can tell people on your website that they should go look at this, and they'll see it. In other words, you get to control how often and how long the message and the protest is in front of the public, unlike in the offline world where you're at the mercy of the circumstance of people walking by and the limited opportunity to see it on the news. From there, I want to talk, now this is a dynamic that, sort of a paradigm that I've developed that applies to all new media, but it really applies to social media as well. We used to talk about Web 1.0 and Web 2.0, and to be honest, I have problems with that labeling, because 1.0 and 2.0 tell you nothing except for the fact that 2.0 is newer than 1.0. I prefer to think of this in terms of dimensions of communication: one-dimensional communication, two-dimensional communication, and three-dimensional communication. Each dimension or dynamic refers to the direction of the flow of communication. So in a one-dimensional approach, you're using social media to put your message out there. And I noticed from the survey at the beginning of the presentation that the vast majority of you, that's how you use social media, to push your information out there. That's a good start, but it's barely scratching the surface of what you can do. The second level is to talk about it in terms of two dimensions, where you are conversing or interacting back and forth with people in your audience, back and forth between your organization and the members of your audience. These are transactional relationships, where you're asking them to give you their email address, where you're asking them their opinion, or you're asking them to donate money, or you're asking them to take an action and report back the results. That two-way dynamic is more about engaging individuals one-on-one than it is about simply pushing your information out there, and it takes you up to a whole new level of effectiveness when you use social media. Now, at the three-dimensional level, here we have to imagine conversation taking place in a three-dimensional space. In other words, your audience can talk to each other. They don't just talk to you, they talk to each other. And this is really important, and I'll explore this a little further on. But it's really, really important to understand that your strategy should also include, in addition to the one-dimensional flow of information out, the two-dimensional transactional interaction with your audience, but it should also think in terms of, what can I do to leverage the fact that my audience is talking to each other in order to advance the goals of my campaign, of my organization, of my mission? How do I leverage that? So when you think about your social media strategy, you really need to be thinking about all three of these dimensions simultaneously, and what are you doing in order to achieve success in each of them. Now, you can see this dog scratching his head. In 1904, Charles Sherrington did research on dog reflexes, and many of you, I'm sure, have experienced this, where you can scratch a dog at a certain spot on the dog's body, and they reflexively scratch behind their ears as a result of this. This reflexive action, Sherrington identified that there are certain pressure points on the dog's body where you can scratch in order to get this to happen. But he also determined that you had to scratch sufficiently hard enough to get this pressure point to have the reflexive action. In other words, there's a threshold of stimulus that you need. Beyond that, he discovered that there are several pressure points across the dog where if you scratched any one of those spots above the threshold for that spot, it would produce the same reflex. Then, in a breakthrough, what he did is discovered that if you scratch at two or more different pressure points, in each of those points you scratch it below the threshold that would normally create the reflex in the dog, that the combined effect of the 2 or 3 points of pressure would actually produce the reflex in the dog. Now, I don't mean to compare Congress to a dog, but think about this. The more we can influence Congress, the more channels we can use to influence Congress so that they see their message coming in through social media, they see their message coming in through earned media, they see your message coming in through paid media, they see their message coming in by your lobbyists, by your grassroots lobby days, by emails. The more they see it from more different channels, while no one of those channels may be enough to move Congress, a member of Congress, to change their position, the combined effect of all of them may actually have a much more greater success than simply adding together the value of each one of them. In other words, the whole can be greater than the sum of the parts. And this is really an important strategy. It also is a strategy that a strategic concept that you need to think about in terms of mobilizing your audience and your activists. Email is important. Social media is important. Advertising, earned media, these are all things that hit the public as well and hit your activist constituency as well. And the more they see your message out there, the more likely they're going to latch onto it and deal with it. And the other thing to remember is, you know, we used to live in a world where the producers of content determine the channels of distribution. But we now live in a world where the consumer of content determine the channels of distribution. And so if you're not pushing your content and your actions and your opportunities out through a multiple array of channels that your audience is using, the best case scenario is you're not getting your message to everybody you want to reach. The worst case scenario is that some of them will feel disrespected and may actually organize to compete or oppose you. Now, remember, the tools that I'm describing for you are in the hands of your audience too, and many times they're better at using it than you are. So the last thing you want to do is turn them as a force that competes or works against you. You want them working for you, and so the more respect you show them, the more opportunities you provide for them to get your information through a variety of channels, the better. When it comes to social media in general, there's a lot of talk about, oh, this is a great way to reach the grassroots, the masses. And yes, this is true, and probably more true with Facebook than with Twitter. But the truth of the matter is that, especially with Twitter, I say, but to some degree with Facebook, it is really important to recognize that in some ways, the best use of social media and the best use of Twitter in particular is to reach influencers, because the influencers are there. As I mentioned, 3/4 of Congress are already on Twitter. Imagine, if you could get your message directly to them without having to go through anyone, how effective can that be? But the press are all on Twitter, and policymakers are on Twitter and Facebook. And these new influencers, people who write blogs at the state or state level or on specific issues, niche blogs, organizers who use the internet to organize people, editors of e-newsletters, or just basically caring citizens who care about an issue so much that they have set themselves up as an influencer, and they've built an audience of people because they're talking about the issue that you care about and that they care about. And these people are a new breed of influencers, to the point where we are now at a stage where expanding on what Roper had found in the 1990s, that 10% of the population influenced the other 90% on what to wear, where to eat, who to vote for, what issues to care about. I would say that we're probably starting to push closer to 20% of the population that is using, if you roll in the people who are using social media to influence other people. So there's a growing influencer class, and we want to really tap into it. And why do we want to tap into it? Well, think about this. Every year, Edelman Worldwide puts out a report called the Edelman Trust Barometer. And what they find is that the most trusted institutions in this country are nonprofits, NGOs, and they come in at 45%. Business, media, government all come in the 30s. So the most trusted organization, nonprofits like yours, are still less than half the total score that they could have for trustworthiness. But if you think in terms of individuals, the trust ratings for academics or experts, policy experts, is 64%. The trust rating for nonprofit or NGO representatives are equal to the NGOs themselves. And the trust ratings for people like myself, my peers, your audience's peers, is equivalent to the trust rating for nonprofits. In other words, there are everybody down to, from experts to people like myself, are all at least as trustworthy as your institution. Now, that means that you need to think about this, because if you look at social media, what is social media about? It is about people talking with other people. It's not about people talking with institutions. It's about people talking with people. So the best strategies for your social media is to get your people using social media and use your brand to amplify them to an audience of influential people. That's really the very powerful thing. And even your brand channels, to the extent that you're able to give it a singular voice or identify who's doing the tweeting or who's doing the managing of the page, so that people know, oh yeah, that's John doing it, or that's their communications director. There's somebody there. It's not just an amorphous organization posting information, but it's a human being. I mean, how many times have you ever done this? Sent out an action alert by email, somebody sends you a scathing response in reply, and you email back with an answer, and they get all ashamed of the fact that they were so rude to you because they never imagined that there was a human being at the other end of the email. The more you can make people realize that they're communicating with a human being, the more influential, the more civil the discourse is going to be. And that's going to increase the effectiveness of what you try to do. Now remember, size is not everything. Having a lot of people in your audience isn't necessarily the best thing. It's a good thing, but it's about the quality of the audience. Who's influential? Is this an audience that you have that will help you, or is it just an audience that's there to watch you crash and burn, like Charlie Sheen's 3.5 million people? Clearly, this guy is not influencing these people, but rather that he's entertaining them. And we want to get to the point where we're influencing them and engaging them on a much more substantive level. Now, also, to kind of drive home this point that it doesn't matter how many people necessarily you have in your audience, sometimes if you just have the right combination of people, it matters. So here's an example of Brian Katulis, who is our Middle East expert here at the Center for American Progress. He was in Afghanistan as an election monitor a year and a half ago or so, and as a result of his tweeting from Afghanistan about the elections, his tweets were actually quoted in the Global Post news website, which had over 100,000 readers. When he got back to the United States, he tweeted about some of his comments about the potential election fraud and how to deal with it in Afghanistan. That was picked up by a single journalist who was following Brian, Mark Ambinder, over at the Atlantic Monthly, and he forwarded it to the White House National Security Council, who discussed the issue. Now, you don't necessarily, if you're working at the local level, you don't have to get into the National Security Council at the White House. You just have to get somebody on the city council to read it, and that's a lot easier. So this model isn't necessarily only available to the people who have the very highest levels of influence, but it can be very valuable to anybody at any level, as long as you make sure that you have the right people in your audience following you so that you can get the information to them. And also, don't forget the value of the people in your audience that don't seem to necessarily be great influencers at first, because over time, you may find that as you cultivate your relationship with them, they become more and more willing to advocate on your behalf as their audience grows. And over time, they become more and more influential, and you're part of the stuff that they're sharing with their audience, the substance that they're influencing their audience about. And so this is an example of one of our followers, a guy named Stan, who went from being an email list reader to following us on Twitter to retweeting one of our Twitter accounts. So now he has 400 or 500 followers, and he retweets several of our Twitter accounts, and he carries influence on our behalf to his audience. Now, when you talk about how do I grow my social media audience, really you need to think in terms of a reciprocal value exchange, because it's always about the value exchange, and it's always about social interaction, which means that you have to go through a series of steps. So the first step is always to connect with the person that you want to bring into your audience. That means to follow them on Twitter or to send them a friend request on Facebook. Now, a friend request, as soon as they accept that friend request, you now have a mutual connection with them. On Twitter, you can follow them, but only a small percentage of them, well, it depends. A percentage of them will follow you back. The more relevant your tweets are to what they might be interested in, when you follow them, the more likely they will follow you back. And if you really play this right by targeting the right people who seem to be predisposed to your issue, and make sure that you have good content related to your issue in your tweet stream, you can get 20 to 30% of them to follow you back pretty easily. The next level is to engage with them. On Twitter, retweet them or reply to them with a link to an article that you've published that helps them understand something they may have tweeted about. This gives them value and thus increases the likelihood that they will follow you back. Likewise with Facebook, like or comment on stuff that they're posting on their pages in order to make sure that you deepen that relationship with them. Yeah, you're already friends with them, but you want to encourage them to spend more time liking and commenting on your content, and there is a reciprocal relationship there. And then you want to recommend. On Twitter, there is a convention every Friday called Follow Friday, where people use the hashtag #FF, and I'll talk about hashtags in a few minutes, to say, hey, here are people that I think you should follow, that I follow, that are really good, and you start recommending them. There's also variations of this. There's Progressive Tuesday hashtag, and on Tuesdays, progressives recommend other progressives. Eco Monday, that's where people recommend environmental and climate tweeters to follow. And then without any particular day, there's a hashtag called Women to Follow, which is to help promote really good tweeters who are women and recommend them to other people. On Facebook, the idea is that the more you share content from other people's profiles and pages via your news feed, by liking, sharing, or commenting on it, the more value you're giving to them too, and recommending that people check out their content. This is how you build your audience, by creating that reciprocal shared value relationship. Now, you also want to reinforce behavior. One of the things that we do here at the Center for American Progress is that when people retweet us on Twitter, we add them to a list of super activists. So for CAP Action, which is our 501c4 Twitter channel, if you retweet us, we add you to our one of our CAP Action super activist lists. If you retweet our Progress League Twitter channel, we add you to our Progress League Rock Stars channel. And the idea is that then we can recommend to people on Follow Friday, for example, a list of people that they can follow rather than simply listing out everybody individually. Because if people follow the list, then as we add more people to the list, they automatically get followed by the people who follow the list. So it's a nice dynamic structure. But what we're doing is we're giving value to the people who retweet us by helping to promote them to our audience. And that is the value exchange that we're looking for. You can automate some of this process. Now, there are tools out there which can get you Twitter followers in mass, and most of them are really just, big scatter shots. But there's one tool that I really like because it allows you to control who ultimately you follow and unfollow. I mean, the basic principle is you follow a bunch of people, and then after a few days, the people who don't follow you back, you unfollow. But the key to Tweet Spinner, which is a tool I recommend, it costs $5 a month for one Twitter account and $20 a month for 5 Twitter accounts, is that it finds people based on keywords that they use or based on who they follow or who follows them. In other words, you can tell it to go find people who have already identified themselves as being interested in your issue. That's key, because once you have that, then TweetSpinner pulls them all together and gives you a list to review, and you can go through that list and you say, no, I don't want that one's spam, I don't want that one, that person never retweets, oh, these people look really interesting. And then once you've selected from the list that they pull for you, you can hit one button and TweetSpinner will take care of the process of following the people you've selected. Likewise, of the people that you don't follow, that you follow that don't follow you back, it'll identify who those are, and you can go through the list and say, no, I want to keep that person, I want to keep that person, okay, I can unfollow that person or that person. So while it's automated in the sense of finding people for you and actually going through the process of following and unfollowing, the decision of who to follow and unfollow is always yours. And that makes it very valuable for creating very targeted strategies for making sure you have the right influencers in your audience, people who really care about your issue, who take the time to influence other people for it. And you can go so far as to building offline recruitment. You have events where you're hosting events. You ask people to follow you on Twitter. Make sure you do that. For example, this is not an offline event, but you saw in the early part of and you'll see later when Melissa comes back, a slide that tells you how to follow Half in 10 on Facebook and Twitter. Nothing like asking. If you don't ask, they don't do it. Whenever you send out direct mail to your audience, you should include your Facebook and Twitter handles as part of the text on the card, so that people know how to follow you there. On your business cards, you should make sure that your Facebook page for your organization is on the business cards just as much as your website is on the business card. If your staff have their own individual Twitter accounts, recommend that they put their Twitter handle on their business card if they use their Twitter for work-related things. remember, if you're asking them to use their Twitter, their personal Twitter for work, it's their choice because it's their personal channel. And if they say, no, it's all personal, you have to respect that. But if they're willing to share it with you, that is a great value to your organization, and you should consider that an enormous gift from your staff. And then if you go to networking events, handing out your business card, all of a sudden you're not just handing out your contact information, but your traditional contact information, but you're also handing out your social media contact information. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the anatomy of a tweet because it's, I get a lot of pushback from people saying that there is this sense that you can't do anything serious in 140 characters. And I submit that if you think that's true, you aren't really thinking very creatively. A couple of points. Number one, 140 characters is actually equivalent to a 9-second soundbite. Now, though we wish we could have more time on television, we all know that's about the time that we get. And we have perfected the art of making sure that you make very coherent, compelling statements in 9 seconds. So if you can do it in a soundbite, you should have no trouble doing it in a tweet. Second, ever hear of a haiku? I think haikus are beautiful, and I think that they can be used to describe the universe. I've seen that. But I have counted hundreds of haikus and the characters in them, and so far I have not found a single haiku that's longer than 80 characters. Additionally, who says you're limited to a single tweet? You could do premise 1 in a tweet, premise 2 in a tweet, and then conclusion in a third tweet, and the package is 3 different statements which work together to make your point. Or if you just simply want to do a URL that connects to a longer essay, 500-word blog post or a 10,000-word essay, you're free to do that as well. But as long as the kernel of what you're trying to say is in the tweet, even if people don't click through on the link, they're getting some information from you, and you can do an awful lot. And finally, the really important thing to understand about Twitter is it's an opportunity to have a conversation with your audience, to actually engage and go back and forth. And then all of a sudden, you're not simply talking about one isolated tweet. You're talking about a series of interactions that carry both substance and social connection. And that is very, very valuable. So look at this tweet. This is 140 characters or less. And it's an example of a tweet that we used last summer when we were trying to get the Senate to pass the Defense Authorization Bill with the Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal language in it. We had created a report with Larry Korb, our national security expert who had worked in the Reagan administration as an Assistant Secretary of Defense. And he wrote a report that said, we have to pass this law now so that we can get on with recruiting and help the morale of the troops. So what we've done in this tweet is it says, hey, Chuck Grassley, read our report on repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell with a link and vote for the Defense Authorization Bill. FYI, at Des Moines Dem, at One Iowa, pound IA, and pound P2. Now, there are 3 different ways to create a link in a tweet. One, obviously, is HTTP:// which is a URL. Another way is to do @ and somebody's Twitter handle, which gives a link to their Twitter profile. Not only does it give a link to their Twitter profile, but that person will see that tweet in their public inbox, which is their mentions box. In other words, anytime anybody ever mentions you using this format in a tweet, you will see that that person mentioned you. That is incredibly valuable. It is like delivering an email, if you really think about it. In fact, this tweet delivers a link to this report to Chuck Grassley and asks him to read it and then vote for a specific bill. Now, the third way to create a link is the £, which is called hashtag, and then any string of characters. This creates a hyperlink to a search query on search.twitter.com. So in this particular case, $DADT, the abbreviation for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, is a link to everybody who's talking about Don't Ask, Don't Tell using this particular abbreviation. And if you think about it, if people start using the same hashtag over and over again over time to talk about a certain issue, it is essentially creating a community. Without ever having to register it, you simply use it. Put a hashtag in front of every word becomes a link to a search query. So right away, even if you had 0 followers, if you used this hashtag, it would put it in front of hundreds of thousands of people that are following the conversation about Don't Ask, Don't Tell. In addition, at the end, there are two other hashtags, #IA for Iowa, because anybody who's focusing on Iowa might be focusing on that hashtag, and of course Grassley is the senator from Iowa. #P2, which is the hashtag for the progressive online organizer community, so anybody who's involved in using social media and new media to mobilize progressives, it's going to put in front of them. And then there are two specific @ signs at the end, @Des Moines Dem and @OneIowa. I've included an FYI here for an Iowa blogger, Des Moines Dem, and the Iowa Gay Rights Organization, OneIowa. And this tweet will also end up in their public inbox, which means that they know that Chuck Grassley has been delivered this report, and they're people who will hold Chuck Grassley accountable for this information. That's really, really key. All right, so if you want to know more about hashtags, there are a variety of websites, but here's a good one to start with, tagdef.com. And this is a crowdsourced dictionary of hashtags. You can put in any hashtag, and if anybody has entered a definition for it, it'll tell you what it is. If you're creating your own hashtag, you should go to this website and establish the hashtag and give it your own definition so that other people can find it. It also tells you trending hashtags, new hashtags, popular hashtags, random hashtags, so it gives you a sense of what hashtags people are using. And if you can latch on to a trending hashtag that is related to what you're doing, it means you're putting it in front of hashtags that a lot of people are using and paying attention to at that moment. This is just a big picture of the Actly service that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. As you can see, not only does it allow you to put in a tweet that targets a particular member of Congress, in this particular case it's a petition that targets 2 members of Congress, but it allows you to put in a lot of text on the landing page that tells you more about what it is that you're trying to say about in the petition. And on the right-hand side, it shows you who has retweeted it, both in reverse chronological order on the left and based on how many followers they have on the right. And you can set it up so that you can see the display on a map if you're looking to see for geographic distribution. We did a case study. We did a campaign a while ago on using Facebook to get a couple of bills passed on genocide issues in Africa. The Enough Project, which is our anti-genocide organization, did this. And in the campaign, what they did is they went out to their email list and through social media and asked people to go to 10 members of the House Foreign Affairs Committee to ask them to co-sponsor a bill on conflict minerals. About 1,200 people participated overall, but after the first 500 people participated on the first day, the committee chairman decided to take the bill, which was not expected to come up for a vote last year, and pass it unanimously through the committee. He also grabbed another bill on the Lord's Resistance Army, which was not Enough was also promoting, and said, hey, let's do that one too, and got that through the committee. Both those bills ended up getting passed by both houses and signed into law within 2 months. We know that the campaign was a major factor because after the committee passed both bills out of committee, Chairman Berman contacted the Enough Project and said, we've done what you've asked us to do. Will you please send your activists back to our Facebook pages to thank us? So I don't think you can get any clearer case of cause and effect than that. As you go through and you want to measure the effectiveness of your program, you want to think in terms of 3 buckets of metrics. One is the size of your audience. How many followers on Twitter? How many fans or likes on your Facebook page? How many subscribers or views on your YouTube page? These tell you how big your direct audience is. The second level is to measure audience engagement, because when you engage with your audience, they are then passing your information on to their audience, which both increases your overall audience size, but it also carries with it that enhanced credibility and persuasion that we talked about earlier. By getting that third-party validation from your audience, sharing it with their audience, you get much, much more out of it than simply reaching out to a larger audience. And finally, 3, driving traffic back to your website and getting people to sign up for your email list. Now, I want to stress here that the vast majority of the people you engage on social media will never come to your website, and they will never sign up for your email list. And those that do are great. and you'll get some. But that is why it is so important to be out on social media, because your audience is bigger than that audience that comes to your website and your email list. And you need to be delivering your message to them. So whenever you tweet or post on Facebook, don't just say, read our report on X with a link to it. Tell them something about the report. We found that poverty is increasing for children in this country at a rapid rate. Read more with a link. So that even if they don't read more, they know poverty is increasing at a rapid rate for children. And that is the piece of information you want them to carry with them. So there are various tools out there. I'm going to give you some examples. To measure your audience growth on Twitter, you can use twittercounter.com, and here you can put in the Twitter handle of anybody, and you can see its growth over time. Plus, it'll show you the rate at which you're growing and show you how long it'll take you to reach certain milestones. And if you're not growing fast enough, then it kind of alerts you to say you need to do more to proactively change that. Measuring your audience growth and interaction on your Facebook page. When you go to edit your page, there's a link on the left-hand side that says Insights. When you go to the Insights page, they show you a few graphs. Not bad, but if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see export, and you can export any range of data, and a lot more data comes out of that into a spreadsheet that you can then analyze using Excel or some other statistical software that would be displayed on the Facebook Insights page itself. And this is a wealth of data that lets you figure out, hey, I posted this piece of content today, and it did really, really well. Lots of likes, comments, and shares. I posted this piece of content the next day, and it did really poorly. What's different? Different kind of tone, different kind of presentation, maybe a different time of day. It'll help you understand your audience much, much better. You can monitor social media using free tools, or you can pay for some premium tools. Before you start paying for premium tools, get a flavor for it. There are a couple different ways to do it. There's socialmention.com, which is a great website, which it works like Google, but it searches public pages on social media, and it gives you some data in terms of sentiment. Is it positive or negative? What keywords are being used in conjunction with your keywords? Who's the key influencers? So it gives you a lot of help in that respect, and you can click through to each of the results and respond in kind. And then Addictomatic lets you look kind of a more playful interaction where you can set up a page for any keyword and monitor what's happening on Twitter, what's happening on YouTube, what's happening on Google Blog Search, tweet memes. There are a variety of different channels that you can check there. Measuring influence is really useful. There are two free accounts, Clout.com, where you have to register. You should register your Twitter handle there, and if it's individuals on Twitter, you can associate their Facebook pages with it as well. It measures your Clout Score Index, which is your total, your true reach, which is how many of the people that follow you actually engage with you. It even measures how influential your audience is. Twitterlizer is similar, slightly different scale, slightly different approach. You don't have to register an account for it to process the information. So in some ways it's more universally useful, although I think the data on Cloud is more useful. And then there are some premium accounts, like at the bottom you'll see here Thrive, which comes from a company called SmallAct.com, one of many platforms that include Radiant 6, Meltwater Buzz, Scout Labs, Context Mine, a bunch of others, which are essentially emerging social CRM platforms that help you better understand your audience, engage with them, monitor them, and collect some really great data about what they bring to the table and what's happening with your tweets and Facebook posts. And then another one of my favorites is if you go to backtype.com, you can put in the URL of any of your website pages, and it'll tell you how many people have tweeted a link to it, how many people have shared a link to it on Facebook, on Reddit, on Dig. And if you go to backtweets.com, which is its sister site, you can actually see a list of all the people who have tweeted a link to your page. And the premium version of that even gives you measures of reach and impressions. How many people were following the people who tweeted the link, and how many times was the link served up on somebody's web browser or Twitter application. Well, that's gone through a whole lot of information, and I just want to turn it back to Melissa for a few more comments, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Alan. Every time I listen to you talk about social media, I learn something new. So thank you so much for giving that presentation. I'm going to say a few words about how you can plug into the anti-poverty movement on social media and specific ways that you can use social media to get involved in the current budget debates. So before I delve into the social media element, I just want to give a little bit of political context. As many of you know, the 112th Congress is presenting a challenging landscape for advocates who are concerned about reducing poverty. So a couple of key points on this. Just last week, the House GOP released its budget proposal to fund the remainder of fiscal year 12. This proposal gets 2/3 of its proposed cuts from programs serving low and moderate income people, and then proposes additional tax breaks for millionaires. It also includes proposals to end Medicare as we know it by converting it into private vouchers, as well as proposals to block grant Medicaid and SNAP, or food stamps, which would undermine their ability to serve those in need and to respond to recessions. Another big threat that we're facing is radically changing the structure of the budget by imposing what's known as a global spending cap. Basically, this is a backdoor way to achieve many of the cuts I described above by forcing through cuts so draconian that many human needs programs would either be eviscerated or forever underfunded. This is one of the biggest threats we're facing this year, and we really need your help to mobilize. But while these developments pose new challenges, advocates can take action to reduce poverty and fight for economic security through effective grassroots advocacy, and social media has been a key part of our strategy to that end. So today I'm going to talk about 3 key points about how social media can help amplify our advocacy in the budget debate. The first step is to get connected and plugged into the anti-poverty community. The second is to join us in using social media in the broader budget debate that we're involved with. And the third is to use social media to amplify your existing advocacy, and I'll walk through each of those quickly. So the first step is to get plugged in. So to facilitate this, Half and 10 has developed a social media directory for the anti-poverty community. The directory, which is listed on our website, serves to connect others to Half and 10's accounts and to promote other groups fighting poverty at the national, state, and local levels. So by following and by promoting one another's work on social media, we can help create those echo chambers that Alan talked about and reach a wider network of interested advocates and organizations with timely communications and action opportunities. So this is what it looks like on our website. And in order to join, just check it out at halfand10.org/grassroots/social media directory, and email us at info@halfand10.org if you'd like us to add your organization to the directory so that others who go there can find you and follow you as well. So the next is to take action in the budget debate that I described earlier. You can use social media to participate in the Save for All campaign, which is strengthening America's values and economy for all. This campaign, which is being convened by our Half and 10 partner, the Coalition on Human Needs, is bringing together over 1,600 national, state, and local groups together advocating for a budget that espouses the principles on this slide: protecting low and moderate income people, preventing those multi-year appropriations caps I touched on, preventing restrictive and structural changes to essential programs that low-income people rely on, and balancing spending cuts with progressive revenue sources so that we have a balanced deficit reduction debate. So how do you get involved in this conversation? Social media is a really important part of the Save for All campaign, and we are leading a tweet of the day where every day we circulate budget facts to help clarify the choices we have in reducing the deficit and the consequences of irresponsible deficit reduction. We are doing a lot of offline outreach in addition to what we're doing online. One thing that I highlight as a best practice in the way that we've grown our social media presence is by doing a lot of in-person and offline outreach to build our online outreach. So dozens of our partners are now retweeting these facts, as you can see on this page, and they're retweeting these facts to educate the public, and then they link to action opportunities. So we hope that, number one, you'll join the social media directory, but also that you'll join this campaign, and you just use the hashtag #SaveForAll to participate. And also, if you have a fact or an idea you'd like to be a part of the Save for All campaign about something going on or how the budget would impact your community, you can also email us at info@halfand10.org, and we can tweet it out. So finally, we want to talk about some other opportunities to amplify our voices on the budget debate using social media. So just one example that we recently used, we put out a quiz: how would the GOP budget affect those in poverty? This is that budget I was talking about that would block grant Medicaid and the food stamp program while making 2/3 of its cuts for low-income programs. So we circulated a fun quiz, an interactive quiz, to educate the grassroots about what exactly is in that budget and then to direct them to further action steps. We then use an interactive way to tweet it out, saying, I got a 9 out of 12 on the quiz, or what did you get, and trying to engage people in a conversation about it. And the result was that we've actually gotten hundreds and hundreds of click-throughs on our Twitter and Facebook channels for this quiz, more even than we're getting on our traditional email channels. And so you can do similar things with products and grassroots products that you're putting out on the budget debate to help drive traffic to those sites, as Alan said. So another opportunity, something I want to highlight is we are, along with our partners, the Coalition on Human Needs, collecting stories of the ways that these budget cuts could impact people, jobs, and communities, and to put a human face on irresponsible cuts. We are creating an interactive online story map called Road to Shared Prosperity, which will pair these data with pair these stories with state-by-state data on the social and economic picture of a state, so that people can find out what's going on in their state and then read or watch videos of stories of how these budget cuts would affect them. And so we'll hope that, number one, you'll check out some of these compelling stories at the site I've listed, as well as submit them if you have a story about how a federal program has made a difference in your business, your community, or your family. And we're incorporating this offline advocacy into our social media advocacy. So when we do these Save for All tweets, for example, we're pairing a fact of the day. So, for example, the House bill will cut half of the veterans receiving housing vouchers with a story. And so, again, we're creating that complementary fact and story to really drive home the points we're making in the budget debate. So to close out, I want to, number one, urge you to get involved with the Save for All campaign and with Half in 10. So one way you can do this, I don't have the link listed here, but it will go out with our follow-up materials, is to go to chn.org in order to get involved in Save for All and sign their statement of principles. In order to get involved with Half in 10 and continue to get more information on trainings and action steps and ways to get involved with social media, we urge you to pledge your support to cut poverty in Half in 10 years, and I've included the links to the pledge form for both an individual and for an organization. You can also, if you don't want to pledge, you can sign up for our newsletter on our homepage, halfin10.org, and so that we can send you information about future action opportunities. We know that as we recover from this recession, in addition to tackling these immediate budgetary debates and challenges, we have to tackle poverty's root causes by creating more decent wage jobs, strengthening our work supports, and investing in children early on so that everyone can participate in the economy. So we hope that you'll join us in endorsing a goal to cut poverty in half in 10 years, and also to following us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube so we can all stay connected via social media. So here's our contact information. And I now want to turn it back over to Rachel to moderate the question and answer session. As a reminder, you can use the Q&A button at the top of the screen to submit questions to myself or Alan.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. We do already have several questions. Our first question is, I use Facebook as informal communication with friends on things, on friends. I also use LinkedIn for more professional communication. Is there a rule of thumb on which to use?
Well, not necessarily a rule of thumb. It all depends on what, Facebook is interesting because your core account on Facebook is your personal account. And then from the personal account, you can create a Facebook page. The Facebook page would be your primary point of contact for the organization. They've made changes recently to your Facebook page that allows you to click a button and then interact on other Facebook pages and profiles as the brand name in the page instead of as you as an individual, so you can toggle back and forth from the page. Given that, it makes a lot of sense to, keep your page for communicating as your profile as communicating for yourself, and the page for communicating as the organization. But that said, any staff person who, any member of an organization that wants to use their personal page to advocate for their cause and to promote the work they're doing at their job, they should be encouraged to do so. And, it is all about what you want to use your Facebook page for. If that's part of how you want to use it, then that's a great thing for the organization. If it's not how you want to use it, well, it's your prerogative because it's your personal page.
Great. Thank you for that question. Our next question is, can't the host just delete posts you place on their page or their wall?
Yes, they can. And when that happens, when enough actually targeted Intel for the conflict minerals page campaign, and Intel started deleting all the posts, all the people started to go everywhere across social media, on other pages, in Facebook, on Twitter, and started bad-mouthing Intel for censoring comments to the point where Intel was forced, with mud on its face, to put the post back up and to engage. It is a bad strategy to do that, and anybody who does it creates a news opportunity and a catalyst for more kinds of activities. So, you know, if they do it, just turn that into a plus for yourselves.
Great. Our next question or comment: I am drowning in email. Following this advice is likely to result in a giant increase in tweets and Facebook messages adding to that flood. How can I manage this daily deluge so that I can actually read and respond to important messages?
Well, first of all, if you think about it, when I come to work, I open up Outlook and I open up TweetDeck, which is the application I use to manage my Twitter and Facebook channels. And then on TweetDeck, what I do is I have columns that focus on the people that are, you know, friends, work colleagues, colleagues at my office, people who are focused on different issues. So it's compartmentalized. Then I start looking, and basically if a message arrives on one or the other, I respond to it. If you think about it, a lot of the people that are emailing you with yup, no, oh, okay, you know, that kind of stuff, they'll start using Twitter to interact with you instead. And then, so it's not. So in many cases, it's not an issue of more communication, but rather people will migrate and split up, and some of the what you got by email will now start coming in by Twitter because it's more appropriate to do that sort of back and forth text messaging on Twitter than it is on email. Beyond that, I think in general, because the tools allow you to, just like you can use Outlook to sort email into the appropriate folders to help manage and know what is important and what is not important, and just you can use TweetDeck and tools like that with Twitter to organize people so that you can see what, you know, keep track of the most important things anyway. So on a communication level, it can be very, very easy to manage. But the other thing to remember is that Twitter and Facebook are not just about communication like email. They're about watching what's happening on an issue space, what people are saying about your organization that you don't know anything about. It's about engaging and understanding what is happening to your brand and your issues out in the public debate. And if you are not part of that conversation, you are ignorant of it, and you have no possibility of ever influencing it.
For that question. Our next is, how do you find a list of issues with their common hashtags to ensure people interested in a particular issue?
So as I showed you, tagdef.com shows you some trending things. What I like to do to find hashtags is I'll go into search.twitter.com and I'll start searching a variety of keywords and using the keywords with and without a hashtag at the beginning of it. And you can start to see what people are saying about that issue and note what hashtags people are using. Then when you find a list of potentially useful hashtags, you can then search for the hashtag on search.twitter.com and see two things. One, how frequently is that hashtag being used? If it's being used every minute or so, that's a great hashtag. If it's being used a couple times an hour, not bad. Every hour or so, a little less frequently, you know, once a day or so, not very useful. And then you can look down the left-hand side and see whether it's all one or two people using the hashtag or if it's a whole bunch of different people using the hashtag. And the more people you see using it, the better. Once you've identified that, then you know which hashtags are the best ones to use, and you can start using them.
Our next question is, you didn't mention much about LinkedIn. Do you find it effective to get more folks engaged with your organization at the Facebook and Twitter channels?
The jury is still out on that. LinkedIn is an interesting tool. You can use LinkedIn to write out to Twitter and things like that. So if LinkedIn becomes your platform, you can connect it with Twitter, and it provides that opportunity. But I think at this stage, it's still a very kind of focused resume audience. A lot of people have LinkedIn, but not a lot of people use it to communicate with people. And so I tend to focus on LinkedIn as a place to, you know, allow my students, for example, to find people that I'm connected with that they may want to get a job with, and then I'll do a reference for them. It's very useful for that. Now, the other thing is you should probably communicate and ask your members what platforms they use and how they use them. If you find that a large percentage of your audience uses LinkedIn as a communication platform, well, then you should be there. But if you find that they don't, then you shouldn't.
Thank you for that question. Next up, if beginning today, how long do you think it will take an organization to develop the strategy, implement, and receive sizable results using social media?
Well, as I said, you can start a Twitter channel today with 0 followers, and if you use the right hashtags to put your message out, you can get your message in front of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people instantly. There's no other platform out there that lets you do that, and that is extraordinary. As far as getting people to follow you directly, as far as people getting to click through and do what you ask or share, that's going to be a function of how well you do it. But using a combination of the strategies that I've talked about for building your audience with the right people, using other channels to communicate with key influencers that you want to have follow you, so that you're not just using Twitter to communicate with them, you email them if necessary, you talk to them in person when the opportunity arises. You can start building a core group of influencers in your community that are looking to you for content to share and get them to share it out, and that can escalate. You can set up a program on Twitter that starts to make an impact in your space in a couple of days if you get the right few people to follow you right away. For example, if you can get the chairman of the committee that's doing the bill that you're fighting for to follow you on the first day because you called their office and said, we'd love you to follow us, all of a sudden, no matter how many other people you get, you have the audience of the one person that matters the most, and that is invaluable.
And I would just add from Half and Ten's experience that we found that the more we put into it, the more we got out of it. In the beginning, I think I was a little bit skeptical of the power of social media to get our message out there. But as we began, putting more resources in it and incorporating it into our offline conversations, as Alan said, and doing some targeted outreach, we really found that we were able to use it to amplify our voice.
Yeah, I would double down on that and say that since Half and Ten has done that, the number of click-throughs on their links that they've been putting out has skyrocketed. And they get over 9,000 click-throughs on their content a month, based on what they push out over Twitter and Facebook. That's an awful lot of traffic because they have a very targeted audience that they're pushing to.
Great. Our next attendee asks, regarding the Save for All campaign, you said that SNAP and Medicaid would be block granted. Does that include the WIC program too?
So there's a proposal in the Ryan budget to block or to cap the Medicaid and SNAP program. WIC is a program that's funded on an annual basis by Congress in a discretionary manner, so it wouldn't be impacted by a SNAP block grant. But if a global spending cap were put in place, which is one of the proposals out there that could be attached to must-pass legislation later this year, it would essentially a global spending cap could crowd out so much domestic discretionary spending that even priorities like WIC could be affected. That's why we're so concerned about these structural changes of the budget. So while we're focused on specific cuts as well and making those choices clear, we're also focused on warding off some of these structural changes that at the top line level, they're not saying we're going to cut WIC, they're not saying we're going to cut Head Start, but if a global spending cap or those kinds of structural budget changes are implemented, the end result is the same.
All right, our next question asks, any suggestion or guidance on info overload for subscribers? Are there too many tweets, or is it more substance versus quantity?
I mean, in terms of pushing stuff out? There's a couple of different approaches to this. In some ways, I always think it's about managing expectations. So if you have a channel that's not very active and you let people know, we tweet once a day or a few times a week, they know to expect that, put that in the bio, and so they won't look for more. If you plan on tweeting several times a day, as long as what you're tweeting is valuable, substantively valuable, interesting, and you're not just tweeting a gazillion things in a row over and over and over again so that it dominates the field. In other words, wait in between tweets so that other people they're following get to show up. You shouldn't have too much trouble with that. But, you know, the idea is keep track of your follows and unfollows. And if you find a lot of people are unfollowing you, you may reach out to them and ask them why, or just basically say, maybe I'll scale it back a little or reassess. But I think, you know, if you pay attention to see what kinds of tweets you do that get retweeted and make more of your tweets that kind of thing, you'll find that you'll improve the sustainability of your audience's attention without overloading them.
All right, our next question is, how do you deal with people who write or post offensive things on your space?
Well, you know, that's inevitable. And I'd rather that they did it on MySpace where my supporters can swarm them and respond and say that's ridiculous, or where I can put out a substantive response that clarifies things, than that they say it anywhere else where I have no influence at all, number one. Number two, persuasion research in the psychology field shows that when you allow for both sides of the argument to be presented on in your space, you increase your credibility and persuasion. And so I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you can maintain the ability to frame it. You may show that you're willing to entertain honest discussion with the other side, and as a result, it makes you more attractive. Because if people want to see what the other side are saying, they can go to the other side's website, and you're not part of that. Or they can engage on your site, and you're not part of that conversation. I think that the second choice is a better choice for being influential. Now, actually, can I if somebody crosses a line in terms of hate speech or profanity that violates Facebook's terms of use, or if they cross a line and do electioneering kind of stuff and violates your 501c3 status, you are fully within your rights to delete those comments and just simply say, you know, we've deleted, post something that says, we've deleted this comment because it violated terms of use that we've posted. You know, please stay within these parameters, and you can say whatever you want. I think people will be understanding of that if you do that. But beyond that, just simply deleting things that you disagree with is not a wise thing.
Our next question, is there a site to quickly find the extensive list of members of Congress on Facebook and Twitter? What about state legislatures?
So there's a website called govsm, govsm.com, which is a wiki that lists members of Congress on Facebook and Twitter. I think it goes a little deeper in terms of local, but that's the best source right now. It's not always the most up to date, but it's as close as most anything out there that's out there that's publicly accessible. And if you find new stuff that isn't there, just email it to or sign up to update the pages, and you can actually contribute to it. But it's a great starting source. govsm.com.
Great. Our next question is, which is a better way to separate social media accounts for separate branches, departments, or identifying speakers, posters on one account?
I'm a big fan of diversifying your channels because it goes back to that idea that some people, you know, the consumers should be in control of what they get. In much the same way as an RSS feed from your website. You may set up RSS feeds for different issue areas if you're a multi-issue organization, or for different campaigns if you want to keep them separate. You should have a primary brand channel, which is the responsibility of the primary brand channel is to promote the works and the content of all your channels, and then let your special projects and specific staff manage separate channels to allow people who want a more narrow focus on it to work that way. Now, that's the approach I take. I know the Heritage Foundation, for example, takes the opposite approach, and they run everything through a single organizational brand channel. They do have their staff using individuals, but their separate projects are all run through one single brand channel. And so what they end up with is many, many more people on a single channel, but those people are getting a lot of content that they may not want because they may only be interested in one or two things that the organization does. So you have to think in terms of, am I a single issue organization? And if so, maybe I only need one channel, or am I a multi-issue organization or a diverse kind of a complicated single-issue organization where I might need a couple of separate brand or project channels. And at all times, I think you should encourage your policy experts and your communications staff, your outreach staff, to have their own channels and use them as well.
That question. Our next is it better to create new hashtags or to use existing ones in terms of connecting people to an issue and creating traffic?
All right, so there's value to both depending on the situation. If you create a new hashtag with the intention of reaching new people, it won't work because nobody's using it. So if you want to reach an audience that is already out there, that's already engaged, and reach new people, using hashtags that are already being used is the most important thing. If you want to create a hashtag to separate out your conversation from the rest, that's also very valuable. That may be for an event, or maybe for a campaign, or maybe for a specific issue. And so to establish that, I would pair that new hashtag you're creating with one or two of the hashtags that reaches out to the larger communities that already exist, so that they start to see and say, hey, we've created a new hashtag for this discussion, love people to use it, but use both of them so that you're reaching out to the new audience, to the big audience that exists, and encouraging them to use yours as well. Also, if you're going to create your own hashtag, as I said earlier, go to tagdef.com, and also go to, there's a wthashtag.com, as in what the hashtag, and put the definition of your new hashtag in there so that people can find out what they mean.
Question is, we've been seeing quite a few requests to post calls to action to our fans and followers via our social media channels for many successive issues at the state and federal levels. Is there a guideline for timing in managing these postings and suggested actions so as not to incur fatigue?
Well, you have to remember that, especially on Twitter, and Twitter is, there's two different types of communication online, synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous is when people communicating with each other are there at the same time. Asynchronous is they're not there at the same time. So like telephone conversations are synchronous, but email is asynchronous. And so Twitter is a little bit of both. While it can be used asynchronously, the truth of the matter is that most people use it synchronously. In other words, if you post something at 9 o'clock in the morning and then you post a similar post at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you're likely going to expose it to a different audience. And so as far as fatigue is concerned, if you always post the same thing at 9 a.m., you'll get fatigue. But if you post it at the same thing 2 or 3 different times during the course of a day, you won't get fatigue. So that's number one. On Facebook, it's much, much more asynchronistic. And so, not repeating your post as often is a good thing, although sometimes it does make, I do think that it's always a good idea to post a call to action a couple different ways with a couple of different framings or messaging over the course of a few days, because you'll get more engagement. Some messages just resonate with some people more effectively than others. Not contradictory messages, but just tweaks to how you actually ask for people to take action.
It looks like we have time for one last question. I noticed you only mentioned use of personal and fan pages on Facebook. Is the Facebook Causes page defunct? Other than through Causes, are there ways to raise money on Facebook?
There are some people that love Causes, and there's a core audience on Facebook that use it. Personally, I never accept any request for Cause, because it's just, for me, it creates overload for me. I find, and what we have found over history on Facebook is that for the most part, the standard functions are the ones that work the best, and the other functions may or may not work depending on how good they are and what kind of audience they're appealing to and the timing. So, if you have a big Causes audience, or you can build a big Causes audience, it may be very valuable to you. But I think more and more the functionality is being built into the Facebook pages that allows you to do a lot more than you used to be able to do, making Causes less and less relevant.
Great, and with that, we'll turn the floor over to Melissa.
Thanks, Rachel, and thank you, Alan. I just want to let everyone know how much we appreciate your attending the training. Before signing off, if you would take this quick survey, it will help us to improve future webinars and trainings that we do. Thanks so much for connecting with us, and we hope to see you on Twitter and Facebook. Thanks again, everyone.